I'd like to dedicate this story to my father, who never really seemed lost and always seemed to know where he was going. And in that regard, I guess I would be the counterbalance to that. I hate being lost. And that happens to me quite frequently because I have a lousy sense of direction. We have a 30-foot straight driveway at my house, and my wife swears that I get lost driving out of it. I think the problem with being lost is the sense of disorientation, the unfamiliarity. It was particularly scary when I recently found myself lost in the town where I grew up. A couple of years ago, my life wasn't working out quite the way I had expected. I wasn't a film star. I wasn't on any A-list. I wasn't even the funny neighbor on a bad sitcom. A lot of my friends were talking about retiring, and I felt like I was still at the beginning of my career. I needed to recharge my batteries, connect to something grounding, defibrillate my life, shock myself back on track. Then I had what I thought was a great idea. I would start at the beginning. I would literally go home to the place that I was born, Perth Amboy, New Jersey. Gateway to the shore. Now, I was very young when I was born, so what I remembered could be expected to be different and unfamiliar. My memories were of bright Christmas lights gaily strung down Smith Street, and then there was the heady smell of popcorn and candy wafting through Reynolds, an exciting department store that had a small rocket ride in the front that went like this. Well, it was exciting for a 3-year-old. What do you want? I remember summers, we had these big leafed catalpa trees that housed fat, fuzzy caterpillars, and there were gentle breezes that blew in from the Raritan Bay. But that was then. Perth Amboy had been in an economic slide for decades. Downtown was now an unending series of badly named discount stores. Discount Bargain City, Senor Pepe's Bargain Galaxy, Punjab's Basement Bargain Universe. The place looked like a dump. I wondered where all the good memories went, or if they ever really existed. And when I was 4, we moved about 20 minutes away to Edison, birthplace of the electric light bulb. And we lived right on the border of the town where most of my friends lived, Metuchen, the brainy borough. It seemed like every place I lived had a subtitle. Anyway, I decided I had to go back to this house in Edison. This was home. This was where I really grew up. This was where my friends and I experienced landmark moments and made lifelong memories. Bar mitzvahs, high school, dating, first kisses, make-out parties, adventures and misadventures. This was where I could breathe easily and feel whole again. There were so many memorable moments. I remember I loved the crunch of autumn leaves, the bite and the beauty of snowy winters, the unmistakable smell of crayons that fell into the vent of one of my best friend's cars and melted every time we put the heater on. I had almost forgotten about the magic of fireflies or hearing the good humor truck bells that triggered a stampede of neighborhood kids. There were even smaller moments, like the peculiar hue of greenish-gray clouds of a coming storm. I remember my father, brother, and I rushing to plant hundreds of plugs of zoysia before the rain hit. Zoysia is a creeping grass that resists grubs. And I remember the distinct smell of the nitrogen-rich air after the rain. Growing up and walking the streets of my town gave me confidence. I owned those streets. I guess I thought I would always own that place, and it would never change. But, like Wendy and Peter Pan, it did change. Or perhaps like a duplicitous lover, it simply lied. When I returned to my town, I was struck by a pain that burrowed deep like a poison arrow into my soul. It was only 40 years later, but I didn't recognize anyone. The streets looked different. My block looked different. My house looked different. The sapling my father, brother, and I planted in the front yard was now a big gnarled tree. Zoysia was replaced by sod. I guess the grubs got it anyway. I was an alien observer, an unwilling stage manager in Thornton Wilder's Our Town. I felt lost in my hometown, and now I felt an even deeper sense of being lost in my life. Right about then, I started channeling Nietzsche, Kierkegaard, and the other existentialists. I suddenly realized that what I thought was my life only existed in my mind. I watched as unfamiliar families went to their stores, did their chores, were busy making their memories in their town. I felt the ice water shock of knowing that I owned none of it. I realized that even the wonderful memories I thought I made with friends may only exist in the electric synapses of my mind. The people I shared those moments with probably remember them differently, if at all. I left the town where I grew up and drove to my parents' current home. Now, they were living in an active retirement golf course community, which, if I wanted to live there, I shockingly realized I met the requirement of being over 50. So much had changed wherever I looked, including me and some of my body parts. But all I wanted was a sense of ownership, of something. So right there, in my parents' retirement community, I had to come to grips with my existential truth. I walked off the cement slab patio of their home and onto the 9th green, which the HOA rules forbid me to do, but screw it, the HOA and everything else is just an illusion, right? I turned toward the back 9 holes because I didn't want to have a profound, transformational, life-changing moment looking at some stranger's house on the other side of the 9th green. I looked up at heaven and I said, "Is this it?" A calm sense of peace enveloped me like the Snuggie robe blanket you can get on a late-night infomercial. That sense of peace helped me to realize that we never have ownership of anything in a world that's constantly changing. But that's okay, really. So maybe it's a little disturbing when you finally realize that we come into this life alone, we live it alone, and we leave it alone. But along the way, we have our family, our friends, our extraordinary consciousness and creativity. I looked around at the golf course and the houses on the other side of the green and my parents' house. I could see my parents through the den window watching Jeopardy. That was their routine. It made them feel safe, in control. In that moment, I had an intense feeling of love for my parents, for my history, for my friends, and for everything I've ever known or done. I understood that feeling was simply that I've had so much damn fun doing it all, and doing it with all the people that I love. In a weird way, I felt like I was on a long road trip, on a rented bus, with everybody that I've ever known. We are all passengers on the same rented bus, but at least we are sharing this ride together, no matter how lost we feel. And being lost loves company. I've carried that feeling wherever I've gone since taking that trip back home. It keeps me in a profound sense of appreciation and gratitude wherever I am and with whomever I'm doing anything with at any particular moment. So as I look around this room right now, I have to say, it's nice to be sharing this ride with you. Thank you.